You stepped down as CEO in late 2018. Talk a little bit about how your view of the firm has evolved with the passage of time, and also as you've lived, you lived so intensely inside Goldman Sachs for so long. Now you live not so intensely outside of Goldman Sachs, or maybe just as intensely, but I don't think so.
For one thing, when I left the firm, it's clear to me that the firm should increase its dividend.
Well, we did.
Yeah. No, but all things considered, I will say that, you and I represent, if you think of the three people associated, when public, it happened during the Hank years. I did it, now you're here. And there's a way of thinking about it. There was a process, really, by which the firm became a public company, in a way. And Hank was clearly running a partnership. Because even as a public company in those years, the partners controlled it. In fact, the board of directors was dominant, was almost, was still a majority Goldman Sachs partners. And over time, people left, people sell down, and over time it becomes more and more real, and it kind of gets reflected. Private company is different than a public company. A private company, you cared about your capital count. You didn't care about whether you earned the same amount of money at the firm every year. If there were 10 years and you had 4 super duper years and 3 so-so years and 2 years you lost money. I don't know if that adds up to 10, but anyway, who cared? It's sort of, you worked for your career, you didn't get any money until you retired and you got your capital count got emptied out. And nobody cared that. But in a public company, you don't own the firm. You own a little bit of the firm, but we don't control the firm. The shareholders do. It's their firm. And they want smoother earnings, not totally smooth earnings, because the value of the firm to the public shareholders is the earnings multiplied by a multiple. And that multiple is affected by the predictability and the likelihood that those earnings would continue to grow. And that wasn't something that, Hank Paulson wore that much. And it was something that was starting to emerge that way. And I'd say in a lot of ways, David, you sort of completed the IPO process in a way, because you did some things that I wouldn't have done. And guess what? I'm not sure the firm would have had the same multiple today if I was still there, because I really was grounded in a firm that bore a lot of the risk itself, that did things on balance sheet. And I would, kept it there. And I thought it was a big part of the mojo of the firm. And it was. But, you sort of calibrate that against what having a lot of investment assets on the balance sheet of the firm would create in terms of volatility of the firm. And so you can make spectacularly more money. But if you're trading, at a multiple of 10 and your competitors are trading at 17, you give up a little bit of E for a little bit more PE. Mm-hmm. And that was something that, you get a little bit trapped in your own kind of, worldview. And somebody once said when I was there, and they meant this to flatter me at the time, during the time of the risk, when things were going crazy and we had to be very risk conscious and the world was blowing up and financial crisis, one of the 17 crises of the century that I lived through, they said, it's a good thing you come from the risk side of the business, and isn't it wonderful that Goldman Sachs gets the leadership it needs when it needs it at the kind of time. And I said this at the end of the book. I said, I can't say that hasn't been repeated now, because I may have delivered what the shareholders wanted, but I would have done it with greater reluctance. Because I was used to the private partnership where you just tried to maximize the earnings of the firm over time, and you didn't care in what order and to what kind of consistency it came in. And it's a much different world in running a public company. And the challenge, of course, is to run the company as a public company and still preserve all those elements of, we're a risk-oriented firm, and all those other things that make us good risk takers over time, and not just when the sun is shining. And do that and still be responsive to the public, which, kind of tends to be a little bit more short-term and an easy